Hi there again, it's me, Kina Bhattacharjee with Sue, and we are now going to continue our storytelling session of the book Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. And we have, in the first part, if you haven't seen it yet, hover over to the first part where we've covered the first 9 chapters of the book. And in this part, we're going to cover the rest of it. It's another 9 chapters. All right. So in the previous part, you remember, those of you who've seen it, that we were at the point where Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and the family, they were going to now dig themselves further into the ground so that they can escape from the crater and the tunnel that the 3 bad farmers, Boris, Bunce and Bean, had destroyed, and when they were waiting for them outside the crater to be able to shoot them dead, basically. And the Fox family had no access to food and water. They were starving, they were hungry and thirsty, but they still had the will to escape the situation that they were in. So we're now going to find out what happens next, right? And for those of you who didn't know, this is Sue, the panda. She's from the Sooty Show, a UK very popular children's TV show, one of my favourites I grew up with. And she's here to help me tell you the story. And if you're good and you pay attention, she'll give you a kiss at the end. She's promised me. Because in the previous video, she was feeling shy. She's still shy, but we'll see. She'll come round. She'll come round. Okay, so we're now on chapter 10, Boggis's Chicken House, number 1. Right, so let's get to it. This time we must go in a very special direction, said Mr. Fox, pointing sideways and downwards. So he and his 4 children started to dig once again. The work went much more slowly now, yet they kept at it with great courage, and little by little the tunnel began to grow. Dad, I wish you would tell us where we were going, said one of the children. So if you have a look at the picture here, right, if you can see, so they're digging right through. They're doing a good job of the digging, but then the kids don't know where is it that they're heading. But we're hoping Mr. Fox knows where they're going. We'll soon find out. So, thank you, Sue. I wish you would tell us where we were going, said the children. One of the children. I dare not do that, said Mr. Fox, because this place I'm hoping to get to is so marvellous that if I described it to you now, you'd go crazy with excitement. I wonder what that would be. And then, if we failed to get there, which is very possible, you would die of disappointment. I don't want to raise your hopes too much, my darlings. Which is fair, I guess, isn't it? For a long, long time, they kept on digging. For how long they didn't know, because there were no days and no nights down in their murky tunnel. But at last, Mr. Fox gave the order to stop. I think, he said, we'd better take a peep upstairs and see where we are. I know where I want to be, but I can't possibly be sure whether we're anywhere near it. Can you imagine that? You know, heading towards a journey, you're on a journey where you have a rough idea of where you're going to go, but you don't really know where you're going? It's interesting, isn't it? Slowly, warily, the foxes began to slope the tunnel up towards the surface. Up and up it went, until suddenly they decided they came to something hard above their heads, and they couldn't go up any further. Mr. Fox reached up to examine this hard thing. It's wood, he whispered, wooden planks. What does that mean, Dad? It means, unless if I'm very much mistaken, that we are right underneath somebody's house, whispered Mr. Fox. Be very quiet now while I take a peek. Whose house have they come to? Here he is. It is indeed a wooden plank. It looks like some sort of trapdoor or something. And he's managed to find it. Carefully, Mr. Fox began pushing up one of the floorboards. The board creaked most terribly, and they all ducked down, waiting for something awful to happen. Nothing did. So Mr. Fox pushed up a second board. and then very, very cautiously he poked his head up through the gap. He let out a shriek of excitement. Oh, I wonder what it could have been. Sue's excited. You don't know what you're excited for, but you're still excited. She's so excited. She's so excited. Right, enough of that. She's very excited. I've done it, he yelled. I've done it first time. I've done it. He pulled himself up through the gap in the floor and started prancing and dancing with joy. Come on up, he sang out. Come and see where you are, my darlings. What a sight for a hungry fox. Hallelujah. Hooray, hooray. Yay. The 4 small foxes scrambled up out of the tunnel. Yes, that's all right, Sue. Enough of that. The 4 small foxes scrambled up out of the tunnel and were... Sue, stop it. I'm trying to read here. Right. A little bit. I know you're excited, but we need to get to the chapter. The 4 small foxes scrambled up out of the tunnel, and what a fantastic sight it was that now met their eyes. They were in a huge shed, and that the whole place was teeming with chickens. Oh, was there food? There were white chickens and brown chickens and black chickens by the thousands. We're in Boggis's chicken house number 1, cried Mr. Fox. It was exactly what I was aiming at, so he did know where he was going. After all, I hit it snap in the middle. First time. Isn't that fantastic? And if I may say so, rather clever too. He's not modest, is he? Oh well. The small foxes went wild with excitement. They started running around in all directions, chasing the stupid chickens. Wait, ordered Mr. Fox. Don't lose your heads. Stand back. Calm down. Let's do this properly. First of all, everyone have a drink of water. What about Mrs. Fox? Well, that's a good question, because she was still back. If you remember in part 1, she was too weak, poor thing, to be able to help them with the digging. So she stayed back at the hole, while the boys and Mr. Fox dug all this way to chicken house number 1. Oh. They all ran over to the chickens, drinking trough, and lapped up the lovely cool water. Then Mr. Fox chose 3 of the plumpest hens, and with a clever flick of his jaws, killed them instantly. Back to the tunnel, he ordered. Come on now. Also, we're going to go back to the tunnel and then give the food to Mrs. Fox. But of course, the chicken needed to be cooked, right? The quicker you move, the quicker you should have something to eat. One after the other, they climbed down through the hole in the floor, and soon they were all standing up once again in the dark tunnel. Mr. Fox reached up and pulled the floorboards back into place. He did this with great care. He did it so that no one could tell that they've ever been moved. Very clever. My son, he said, giving the 3 plump hens to the biggest of his small children, run back with these to your mother. Ah, so he's going back to Mrs. Fox now, see? So she's going to get something to eat too. Tell her to prepare a feast. Tell her the rest of us will be along in a jiffy as soon as we've made a few other little arrangements. I wonder what they might be. Chapter 11. A surprise for Mrs. Fox. The small fox ran back along the tunnel as fast as he could, carrying the 3 plump hens. He was exploding with joy. Just wait, he kept thinking. Just wait till Mummy sees these. He had a long way to run, but he never stopped once on the way, and he came bursting upon Mrs. Fox. Mummy, he cried out of breath. Look, Mummy, look. Wake up and see what I've brought you. Mrs. Fox, who was weaker than ever now from the lack of food, opened one eye like this and looked at the hens. I'm dreaming, she murmured, and closed the eye again. Poor, poor Mrs. Fox. So sad, isn't it? So sad. You're not dreaming, Mummy. They're real chickens. We're saved. We're not going to starve. Mrs. Fox opened both eyes and sat up quickly. "But, my dear child," she cried, "where on earth—" "Boggis's chicken house number 1, splattered the small fox. "We've tunnelled right up under the floor, and you've never seen so many big fat hens in your life. And Dad said to prepare a feast. They'll be back soon." The sight of food seemed to give new strength to Mrs. Fox. "A feast it shall be," she said, standing up. "Oh, what a fantastic fox your father is! Hurry up, child, and start plucking those chickens." Far away down in the tunnel, the fantastic Mr. Fox was saying, "Now for the next bit, my darlings. This one will be as easy as pie. All we have to do is dig another little hot tunnel from here to there." "To where, Dad?" "Don't ask so many questions. Start digging." I wonder where they'll go next. What is Mr. Fox thinking of now? We'll find out soon. Chapter 12. Badger. It's a new character that's come in. Mr. Fox and 3 remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. Bless them. They knew they were going to have a whacking great feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than Boggis's chickens they were going to eat made them chuggle with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realise that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them dinner without knowing it. "Indeed." "Keep digging," said Mr. Fox. "It's not much further." Further. All of a sudden, a deep voice above the head said, "Who goes there?" The foxes jumped. They looked up quickly, and they saw, peeking through a small hole in the roof of the tunnel, a long, black, pointed, furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Badger. "My goodness me! I'm glad I found someone at last. I've been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights, and I haven't the foggiest idea where I am." So here we are with Badger, and apparently he's a mate of Mr. Fantastic Mr. Fox. Isn't that nice? And you know what they say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Badger made the hole in the ceiling, thank you, Sue, bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. A small badger, his son, dropped it down after him. "Haven't you heard what's happening up on the hill?" Badger said excitedly. "It's chaos. Half the wood has disappeared, and there are men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out even at night. We're all starving to death." So those farmers had actually digged up most of the countryside in that area. Imagine how obstinate they were. "Who is we?" asked Mr. Fox. "All us diggers. That's me and Mole and Rabbit and all our wives and children. Even Weasel, who can usually sneak out of the tightest spots, is right now hiding down my hole with Mrs. Weasel and 6 kids. What on earth are we going to do, Foxy? I think we're finished." So all the while, it's not just the Fox family, but all his other neighbours, they were all suffering. They were all starving. They all had their access to food and water cut off because of those nasty farmers. That's not good, is it? No, that's not good at all. Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back at him because they knew the secret, didn't they? "My dear old Badger," he said, "this mess you're in is all my fault." "I know it's your fault," said Badger furiously, "and the farmers are not going to give up until they've got you. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everyone on the hill." Badger sat down and put a paw around his small son. "We're done for," he said softly. "My poor wife up there is so weak she can hardly dig another yard." Well, so was Mrs. Fox, remember. A lot of suffering. "Nor can mine," said Mr. Fox. "And yet at this very minute she's preparing for me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chickens." "Stop," cried Badger. "Don't tease me. I can't stand it." "It's true," cried the small foxes. "That's not teasing. We've got chickens galore." "And because everything is entirely my fault," said Mr. Fox, "I invite you to share the feast. I invite everyone to share it." That's nice. Sharing is caring, right? You and Mole and Rabbit and Weasel, all your wives and children. There'll be plenty to go around, I can assure you." "You mean it?" cried Badger. "You really mean it?" Mr. Fox pushed his face closer to Badger's, like this, and whispered darkly, "Do you know where we've just been?" "Where?" "Right inside Boggers's chicken house #1. "No." "Yes. But that's nothing to where we're going now. You've come just at the right moment, my dear Badger. You can help us dig. And in the meanwhile, your small son can run back to Mrs. Badger and all the others and spread the good news." Mr. Fox turned to the small Badger and said, "Tell them they're invited to a fox's feast. Then bring them all down here and follow this tunnel back until you find my home." "Yes, Mr. Fox," said the small Badger. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Oh, thank you, sir." And he scrambled quickly back through the hole in the roof of the tunnel and disappeared. Oh, that's nice. They're all going to have a party, it seems. We all have a party, don't we? Chapter 13. Bunce's Giant Storehouse. Oh, so this is where they're going next. "My dear Foxy," cried Badger, "what in the world has happened to your tail?" "Don't talk about it, please," said Mr. Fox. "It's a painful subject." Remember, because in part 1 we saw that the nasty farmers, had shot through Mr. Fox's tail and he no longer had one, and it was very painful for him. They were digging the new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger, and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace now that he was lending a paw. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. "If I'm not mistaken, my dear Badger," he said, "we are now underneath the farm which belongs to that nasty little pot-bellied dwarf, Bunce. We are, in fact, directly underneath the most interesting part of that farm." "Ducks and geese!" cried the small foxes, licking their lips. "Juicy, tender ducks and big fat geese." "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "But how in the world can you know where we are?" asked Badger. Mr. Fox grinned again, showing even more white teeth. It was a big, toothy grin, like this. He reached high and pushed up one wooden floorboard, and then another. He poked his head through the gap. "Yes," he shouted, jumping up into the room above. "I've done it again. I've hit it smack on the nose, right in the bullseye. Come and look." So there they are, over there, going towards Bunce's duck and geese farm. Oh, look, and here's all the duck and geese. Hang on, see if I can show you the picture. Here they are, all these ducks and geese. Quickly, Badger and the 3 small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were so overwhelmed they couldn't speak. For what they now saw was a kind of fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. "This, my dear old Badger," proclaimed Mr. Fox, "is Bunce's mighty storehouse. All his finest stuff is stored in here before he sends it off to the market. Against all 4 walls of the great room, stacked in cupboards and piled upon shelves, reaching from floor to ceiling, were thousands and thousands of the finest and fattest ducks and geese, plucked and ready for roasting. Up above, dangling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams and 50 sides of bacon. Oh, yum, yum, yum. But you only like eating bamboo, Sue. Still, it's yummy. It sounds yummy. Yummy. Okay, if you say so. Do you want to give a kiss to the boys and girls now? She's still very shy. Still shy. What are we going to do? Just feast your eyes on that, cried Mr. Fox, dancing up and down. What do you think of it, eh? Pretty good grub. A lot of grub. Suddenly, as though springs had been released in their legs, The 3 hungry small foxes and the ravenously hungry badger sprang forward to grab the luscious food. "Stop," ordered Mr. Fox. "This is my party, so I shall do the choosing." The others fell back, licking their chops. They were so hungry, poor things. Mr. Fox began prowling around the storehouse, examining the glorious display with an expert eye. A thread of saliva slid down one side of his jaw. Oh dear, because remember they're all very hungry, right? And hung suspended in midair, and then snapped. "We mustn't overdo it," he said. "Mustn't give the game away. Mustn't let them know what we've been up to. We must be neat and tidy and take just a few of the choicest of morsels." Morsels meaning tiny bits or pieces. "We must be neat and tidy. So to start with, we shall have 4 plump young ducks." He took them from the shelf. "Oh, how lovely and fat they are. No wonder Bunce gets a special price for them in the market." "All right, Badger, lend me a hand to get them down. You children can help as well. There we go. Goodness me, look how your mouths are watering. And now I think we'd better have a few geese. 3 will be quite nice. We'll take the biggest. Oh my, oh my. You will never see finer geese than these in a king's kitchen. Gently does it. That's the way. What about a couple of nice smoked hams? I adored smoked ham. Don't you, Badger? Fetch me that stepladder, would you please?" So they're really going for it now. They're taking their revenge. Here's a picture. They're really like hoarding the cupboard, the farm, and taking what they want, on the food they want. Mr. Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. "And do you like bacon, Badger?" "I'm mad about bacon," cried Badger, dancing with excitement. A bit like this, like so. "Let's have a side of bacon, that big one up there. And carrots, Dad." "Yeah, all right, Sue, that's enough, thank you." Now she's shy again. "And carrots, Dad," said the smallest of the 3 small foxes. "We must take some of those carrots." "Don't be a twerp," said Mr. Fox. "You know we never eat things like that." "It's not for us, Dad, it's for the rabbits. They only eat vegetables." That's very true. Rabbits only eat vegetables. Especially carrots. "My goodness me, you're right," cried Mr. Fox. "What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take 10 bunches of carrots." Soon all this lovely loot was lying in a neat heap upon the floor. The small foxes crouched close, their noses twitching, their eyes shining like stars. "And now," said Mr. Fox, "we shall have to borrow from our friend Bunce 2 of those useful push-carts over in the corner." He and Badger fetched the push-carts, and the duck and geese and hams and bacon loaded onto them. Quickly the push-carts were lowered through the hole in the floor. The animals slid down after them, back in the tunnel. Mr. Fox, thank you, Sue. Mr. Fox again pulled the floorboards very carefully into place so that no one could see that they'd been moved. "My darlings," he said, pointing to 2 of the 3 small foxes, "take a cart each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we are having guests for dinner. The badgers, the moles, the weasels and rabbits. Tell her it must truly be a great feast. And tell her the rest of us will be home as soon as we've done one more little job." "Yes, Dad, right away, Dad," they answered, and they grabbed a trolley each and went rushing off down the tunnel. Where do you think they'll be going next? I wonder where. Chapter 14. Badger has doubts. "Just one more visit," cried Mr. Fox. "And I bet I know where that'll be," said the only small fox now left. He was the smallest fox of them all. "Where?" asked Badger. "Well," said the smallest fox, "we've been to Boggies and we've been to Bunce, but we haven't been to Bean. It must be Bean." "You're right," said Mr. Fox, "but what you don't know is which part of Bean's place we're about to visit." "Which?" they said both together. "Aha," said Mr. Fox, "just wait and see." They were digging as they talked. A tunnel was going forward fast. Suddenly Badger said, "Doesn't this worry you just a bit, Foxy?" "Worry me?" said Mr. Fox. "What?" "All this stealing." Mr. Fox stopped digging and stared at Badger as though he had gone completely dotty, meaning mad. "My dear old furry frump," he said, "do you know anyone in the whole world who wouldn't swipe a few chickens if his children were starving to death?" Now there lies an ethical dilemma, which I think mummies and daddies who are watching this would understand. If you were to run a family and the only option was to steal, what would you do? There was a short silence while Badger thought deeply about this. "You're far too respectable," said Mr. Fox. "There's nothing wrong with being respectable," said Badger. "Look," said Mr. Fox, "Boggis, Bunce and Bean are out to kill us. You realise that, I hope?" "I do, Foxy, I do indeed," said the gentle Badger. "But we're not going to stoop to their level. We don't want to kill them." "I should hope not, indeed," said Badger. So they're having here with Badger and Fox, Mr. Fox, having this deep, should I say, ethical discussion, moral discussion. "We wouldn't dream of it," said Mr. Fox. "We shall simply take a little food here and there to keep us and our families alive, right?" "I suppose we'll have to," said Badger. "If they want to be horrible, let them," said Mr. Fox. "But we down here are decent, peace-loving people." Which is true. The animals, if we leave them to themselves, they won't disturb us. They just mind their own business. So what gives us the right to disturb them or kill them or harm them? Something to think about, isn't it? Yes. Badger laid his head on one side and smiled at Mr. Fox. "Foxy," he said, "I love you." "Thank you," said Mr. Fox. "And now let's get on with the digging." 5 minutes later, Badger's front paws hit against something flat and hard. "What on earth is this?" he said. "It looks like a solid stone wall," he said, and Mr. Fox scraped away the soil. It was a wall, but it was built of bricks, not stones. The wall was right in front of them, blocking their way. "Now who in the world would build a wall under the ground?" said Badger. "Very simple," said Mr. Fox. "It's the wall of an underground room. And if I'm not mistaken, it's exactly what I'm looking for." What he's looking for, isn't it? I don't know. Chapter 15. Bean's Secret Cider Cellar. Mr. Fox examined the wall carefully. He saw that the cement between the bricks was old and crumbly, so he loosened a brick without much trouble and pulled it away. Suddenly out from the hole where the brick had been, there popped a small, sharp face with whiskers. "Go away," it snapped. "You can't come in here. It's private." "Good Lord," said Badger. "It's Rat." "You saucy beast," said Mr. Fox. "I should have guessed we'd found you here somewhere." "Go away," shrieked Rat. "Go on, beat it. This is my private pitch." "Shut up," said Mr. Fox. "I will not shut up," shrieked Rat. "This is my place. I got here first." Mr. Fox gave a brilliant smile, flashing his white teeth. "My dear Rat," he said softly, "I'm a hungry fellow, and if you don't hop it quickly, I shall eat you up in one gulp." Oh no. That did it. Rat popped back fast out of sight. Mr. Fox laughed and began pulling more bricks out of the wall. When he made a biggish hole, he crept through it. Badger and the smallest fox followed him in. They found themselves in a vast, damp, gloomy cellar. "This is it," cried Mr. Fox. "This is what?" said Mr. Badger. "The place is empty." "Where are the turkeys?" said the smallest fox, staring into the gloom. "I thought Bean was a turkey man." "He is a turkey man," said Mr. Fox, "but we're not after turkeys now. We've got plenty of food." "Then what do we need, Dad?" "Take a good look around," said Mr. Fox. "Don't you see anything that interests you?" Badger and the smallest fox peered into the half-darkness. As their eyes became accustomed to the gloom, they began to see what looked like a whole lot of glass jars standing upon shelves around the walls. They went closer. They were jars. There were hundreds of them. Upon each one was written the word cider. Oh, so Mr. Fox is really planning a party, a massive party. Here we go. Here's you can see here, huge shelves of cider. Exactly, said Mr. Fox. Tremendous, shouted Badger. Bean's secret cider cellar, said Mr. Fox. But go carefully, my dears. Don't make a noise. This cellar is right underneath the farmhouse itself. Cider, said Badger, is especially good for badgers. We take it as a medicine. 1 large glass 3 times a day with meals and another at bedtime. Oh dear. Imagine how drunk they would be. I mean, in human terms, that's a lot of cider. It'll make this feast into a banquet, said Mr. Fox. Oh, yes, there you go. You're not having any cider, you're far too young. While they were talking, the smallest fox had sneaked a jar off the shelf and had taken a gulp. Wow, he gasped. Wowee. You must understand, this wasn't the ordinary weak fizzy cider we buy in the store. It was the real stuff, home-brewed fiery liquor that burned in your throat and boiled in your stomach. Oh. Ah, gasped the smallest fox, this is some cider. That's quite enough of that, said Mr. Fox, grabbing the jar and putting it down his own lips. He took a tremendous gulp, because if you remember from part 1, the foxes were tremendously hungry and thirsty. So I guess Mr. Fox couldn't help himself and just went for it. He took a tremendous gulp. It's miraculous, he whispered, fighting for breath. It's fabulous. It's beautiful. It's my turn, said Badger, taking the jar and tilting his head well back. The cider gurgled and bubbled down his throat. It's like it's melted gold, he gasped. Oh, Foxy, it's like sunbeams and rainbows. How drunk they would be, mums and dads. You're poaching, shrieked Rat. Put that down at once. There'll be none left for me. Rat was perched upon the highest shelf in the cellar, peering out behind a huge jar because he was scared that Mr. Fox would eat him up, right? Mind your own business, shrieked Rat, and if you great clumsy brutes come messing about in here, we'll be caught. Get out and leave me to sip my cider in peace. At that moment, they heard a woman's voice calling out in the house above them. Hurry up and get that cider, Mabel, the voice called. You know Mr. Bean doesn't like to be kept waiting. The animals froze. Uh-oh. They stayed absolutely still. Their ears pricked, their bodies tense. Then they heard the sound of a door being opened. The door was at the top of a flight of stone steps leading down from the house to the cellar. Someone was starting to come down those steps. Oh no, who's it going to be? Will the animals get caught? Find out. Chapter 16, The Woman. Quick, said Mr. Fox, hide. He and Badger and the smallest fox jumped up onto a shelf and crouched behind a row of big cider jars. Peering around the jars, they saw a huge woman coming down into the cellar. At the foot of the steps, the woman paused, looking to right and left, and she turned and headed straight for the place where Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox were hiding. Oh dear, oh dear. She stopped right in front of them. The only thing between her and them were a row of cider jars. If she were to take a cider jar, she could see them hiding there, right? Oh God. Here she is, the picture of her, reaching up for the cider. You can see there. How many will you want this time, Mrs. Bean? The woman shouted, and from the top of the steps the other voice called back, bring up 2 or 3 jars. He drank 4 yesterday, Mrs. Bean. Yes, but you won't want that many today because he's not going to be up there more than a few hours longer. He says the fox is bound to make a run for it this morning. All this while, Mr. Fox was in their own secret cellar. They didn't know that though, did they? The woman in the cellar reached out and lifted a jar of cider from the shelf. The jar she took was next, but one to the jar behind that was where Mr. Fox was crouching. Oh, God. What's going to happen now? I'll be glad when the rotten brute is killed and strung up to the front porch, she called out. And by the way, Mrs. Bean, your husband promised I could have the tail as a souvenir. Oh, poor Mr. Fox's tail. You mean it's ruined? Of course it's ruined. Oh, the tail was ruined, remember, and he disposed it. He threw it away. They shot the tail but missed the fox. Oh, heck, said the big woman. I did so want the tail. You can have the head instead, said Mabel. You can get it stuffed and hang it on your bedroom wall. Oh, nasty, nasty. Hurry up with that cider. Yes, ma'am, I'm coming, said the big woman, who we now know is called Mabel. If she takes one more cider jar, she'll see us, thought Mr. Fox. He could see the smallest fox's body pressed tightly against his own, quivering with excitement, quivering and shaking like this. Yes, all right, Sue. All right. Give them a kiss now. Still no luck. Still no luck. Oh dear. My goodness, Mabel, I don't care, so long as you get a move on. Then two it is, said the huge woman, speaking to herself. He drinks too much anyway. Carrying a jar in each hand and with the rolling pin tucked under one arm, she walked away across the cellar. At the foot of the steps, she paused and looked around, sniffing the air. There's rats down here again, Mrs. Bean. I can smell 'em. Then poison them, woman, poison them. You know where the poison's kept. Yes, ma'am, Mabel said. She climbed slowly out of the sight, up the steps. The door slammed. Phew, so she didn't get to see Mr. Fox, smallest fox, and Badger. They were spared. Quick, said Mr. Fox. Grab a jar each and run for it. The rat stood on his high shelf and shrieked, What did I tell you? You nearly got nabbed, didn't you? You nearly gave the game away. You keep out of here from now on. I don't want you around. This is my place. You, said Mr. Fox, are going to be poisoned. Poppycock, said Rat. I sit up here and watch her putting the stuff down. She'll never get me. Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox ran across the cellar, clutching a gallon jar each. Goodbye, Rat, they called out as he disappeared. Thanks for the lovely cider. Thieves, cried Shrieked Rat. Robbers, bandits, burglars. All the same word for thieves. Chapter 17. Nearly there now. Nearly there, folks. The Great Feast. Back in the tunnel, they paused so that Mr. Fox could brick up the hole in the wall. He was humming to himself as he put the bricks in place. I can still taste that glorious cider, he said. What an impudent fellow Rat is. He has bad manners, Badger said. All rats have bad manners. I've never met a polite rat yet. Have you met a polite rat? So let me know in the comments. We'd like to know. They grabbed the jars of cider and off they went. Mr. Fox was in front, the smallest fox came next, and Badger last. Along the tunnel they flew, past the turning that led to Bunce's mighty storehouse, past Boggs's chicken house number 1, and then up the long home stretch towards the place where they knew Mrs. Fox would be waiting. Keep it up, my darlings, shouted Mr. Fox. We'll soon be there. Think what's waiting for us at the other end, and just think what we're bringing home with us in these jars. That ought to cheer up poor Mrs. Fox. And then Mr. Fox sang a little song as he ran to keep up the momentum. Oh, kiss you. Do you want to give a kiss now to the girls and boys? Still no luck. Still, will we ever get a kiss from Sue, eh? Will we ever? Home again swiftly I glide, back to my beautiful bride. She'll not feel so rotten as soon as she's gotten some cider inside her inside. How lovely. Then Badger joined in to the song. Oh, poor Mrs. Badger, he cried. So hungry she very near died. Oh dear, gets worse. But she'll not feel so hollow if only she'll swallow some cider inside her inside. They were still singing as they rounded the final corner and burst in upon the most wonderful and amazing sight any of them had ever seen. The feast was just beginning. A large dining room had been hollowed out of the earth, and in the middle of it, seated around a huge table, were no less than 29 animals. They were Mrs. Fox and the small 3 foxes, Mrs. Badger and 3 small badgers, Mole and Mrs. Mole, 4 small moles, Rabbit, Mrs. Rabbit, 5 small rabbits, Weasel and Mrs. Weasel, and 6 small weasels. It's a big party. Here, have a look at the picture. See that? Over here, a massive, really grand feast was being laid out. Think of it, all the while those nasty farmers were still waiting for them upstairs. The table was covered with chickens and ducks and geese and hams and bacon, and everyone was tucking into lovely food. How lovely. "My darling," cried Mrs. Fox, jumping up and hugging Mr. Fox. "We couldn't wait. Please forgive us." Then she hugged the smallest fox of all, and Mrs. Badger hugged Badger, and everyone hugged everyone else. Amid shouts of joy, the great jars of cider were placed upon the table, and Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox sat down with the others. You must remember, no one had eaten a thing for several days. They were ravenous, really, really hungry. So for a while there was no conversation at all, and there was only the sound of crunching and chewing as the animals attacked the succulent food. Yum, 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 yum. Yum, 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 yum. Really, really nice. At last Badger stood up. He raised his glass of cider and called out, "A toast! I want you to all stand and drink a toast to our dear friend who has saved our lives this day, Mr. Fox." "To Mr. Fox," they all shouted, standing up and raising their glasses. "To Mr. Fox, long may he live." Then Mrs. Fox got shyly to her feet and said, "I don't want to make a speech. I just want to say one thing, and it's this. My husband is a fantastic fox." Everyone clapped and cheered. And Mr. Fox himself stood up. Isn't that lovely? "This delicious meal," he began. Then he stopped. In the silence that followed, I wonder what happened in the silence. In the silence that followed, he let fly a tremendous belch, a big burp. Can you do a big burp right now, boys and girls? Try and do a big burp. It's fun, isn't it? There was laughter and more clapping. "This delicious meal, my friends," he went on, "is by courtesy of Mrs. Boggins, Bunce and Bean." More cheering and laughter. Yay! Yay! "And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have." He let fly another colossal belch. Really went for it. You guys ought to go for it too. Better out than in, as he said. "Thank you," said Mr. Fox, grinning hugely. "But now, my friends, let us be serious. Let us think of tomorrow and the next day and the days after that. If we go out, we'll all be killed, right?" "Right," they shouted. "We'll be shot before we've gone a yard," said Badger. "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "But who wants to go out anyway? Let me ask you that. We're all diggers, every one of us. We hate the outside. The outside is full of enemies. We only go out because we have to get food for our families. But now, my friends, we have an entirely new setup. We have a safe tunnel leading to 3 of the finest stores in the world." "We do indeed," said Badger. "I've seen 'em." "And you know what this means?" said Mr. Fox. "It means that none of us ever go out into the open again. They don't need to go out now because they've discovered the tunnel. They've discovered how to access the food from the farms underneath instead of going from above and beyond and downwards, they're digging up and coming into the farms instead. So there's always a way, isn't there? I therefore invite you all, Mr. Fox went on, to stay here with me forever. Forever, they cried. My goodness, how marvellous, Rabbit said to Mrs. Rabbit. My dear, just think, we're never going to be shot at in our lives again. We will make, said Mr. Fox, a little underground village with streets and houses on each side, separate houses for badgers and moles and rabbits and weasels and foxes, and every day I'll go shopping for you all, and every day we will eat like kings. How wonderful is that? The cheering that followed his speech went on for many minutes. So I could imagine, look at that. Look at here. All the cheering and excitement, right? Yay, yay, yay. Still waiting outside. All right, Sue, yeah, all right. Still waiting at the... Yeah, okay. We're almost there now, nearly there. Chapter 18. Still waiting. Outside the fox's hole, Boggis and Bunce and Bean sat beside their tents with their guns on their laps. It was beginning to rain. Water was trickling down the necks of the three men and into their shoes. So they were still waiting and waiting, waiting to see the foxes, if Mr. Fox came out, basically. He won't stay down there much longer now, Boggis said. The brute must be famished, Bunce said. It didn't occur to them, right, the idiots, that they could have just died there of hunger and they wouldn't come up anyway. We know that hasn't happened, but this could have been a possibility, right? But let's not think about that because that didn't happen. That's right, Bean said. He'll be making a dash for it any moment. Keep your guns handy. They sat there by the hole, waiting for the fox to come out. And so far as I know, they're still waiting. The end. We come to the end of that. Wow, so there you go, folks. That was fantastic, Mr. Fox. And what we've learnt from it is that there's always a way. If you're looking for a way, especially a way out, there always is a way out, right? What a lovely story. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to sign off now. Let me know what you thought in the comments. And if you like it very much, we'll do another one. Say bye, Sue. Are you going to give them a kiss now? All right, she will. She'll give a kiss now. Go on then. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.